What if she's still out there? The question echoed through the halls of the police station for months after it happened. A young girl, full of life, vanished into the night without a trace. A kidnapper who believed he had outsmarted the authorities found himself tangled in a web he couldn't escape, all because of one thing. She was smarter than he ever could have imagined. This is the story of Emma Clark, of how she became both a victim and a hero in the most unexpected of ways. You're about to hear the story of a girl whose disappearance shocked an entire town, a case filled with twists, mystery, and shocking revelations. This is not just about a crime. It's about a journey into the mind of a kidnapper who thought he had outwitted everyone, including his victim. But what happens when the victim outsmarts her kidnapper and turns the tables? This is the case of Emma Clark, the girl who vanished without a trace, and the unimaginable way she fought her way back. Let's dive deeper into the shadows. Ashbury was a small town that felt like it was frozen in time, a place where everyone knew each other's name and most people had lived there for generations. The kind of town where the local diner was the social hub, and the only thing that changed from season to season was the type of pie that was in the window. In the heart of this idyllic place lived Emma Clark. At 16, she was already carving out her own identity, smart, compassionate, and driven. She wasn't the popular girl in school, but she wasn't an outsider either. Her charm came from her ability to blend into any situation, making people feel at ease with her effortless kindness. Emma had dreams of becoming a marine biologist, and in a town like Ashbury, that dream felt as distant as the ocean itself. But she held on to it, believing that someday her life would be more than small-town routines. She spent her weekends working at the local aquarium, volunteering her time to help care for the marine life and learning everything she could about the creatures she admired. Her father, Jonathan, was a mechanic, practical and steady. Her mother, Allison, worked at the local hospital, always on her feet helping people, but her heart never strayed far from her daughter. For the most part, the Clark family was simple. They were close-knit, no drama, no complications. In fact, it was a pretty perfect life, one that was about to be shattered in the worst way imaginable. It was October 12th, the night the first chill of autumn had settled over Ashbury. Emma had just left her best friend's house and was walking home. She had texted her mom that she was on her way, and it was only a short walk, one she had made dozens of times before. But that night, something felt off. Maybe it was the whisper of the wind rustling through the trees, or the streetlights flickering, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. By 8:30 p.m., Emma was gone. The phone call came when Allison was just finishing up her shift at the hospital. She had expected Emma to be home by now, curled up on the couch with a book or chatting about her day. But when she called out to her husband, Jonathan, who was working in his garage, there was no answer. He'd been busy under the hood of a car, but now a chill ran through the house. Something wasn't right. Jonathan's phone rang. It was Emma's phone, but it wasn't her voice. The man on the other end was calm, eerily calm. His words were like ice, freezing the blood in Jonathan's veins. "She's with me now. You'll follow my instructions if you ever want to see her again." And then, the line went dead. Allison rushed home, her heart pounding in her chest. Jonathan could barely speak. He was trying to hold it together, but the fear was consuming him. His daughter, his only child, was gone, and whoever had her was playing a game they didn't understand. The police were called immediately. They arrived in minutes, dispatched a team to start searching, and began piecing together every moment from Emma's last known location. No sign of struggle. No evidence that she had been abducted against her will. It was as though she had simply disappeared into thin air. The first breakthrough came when Detective Maria Vasquez stepped onto the scene. She was a seasoned investigator with a reputation for being able to sift through the messiest of cases and find the thread that would unravel everything. But even she felt a sense of unease as she walked the streets of Ashbury. This case was unlike any she had encountered. It wasn't just the disappearance that bothered her, it was the feeling that someone in this quiet town was hiding something. Vasquez had the security footage from the nearby neighborhood cameras pulled up. The image was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. A white van, parked near the spot where Emma was last seen. A man, hooded and moving quickly, stepping out of the vehicle and disappearing into the night. The footage wasn't clear enough to make out any real details, but it was the first lead they had. The van was traced back to Gary Wheeler, a man who lived just a few miles outside of town. He had no criminal history, at least nothing that would warrant suspicion, but Wheeler was an enigma. Quiet, isolated, a loner. The kind of person who kept to himself but never raised any alarms. Detective Vasquez wasn't convinced. Wheeler was the only lead, and she intended to follow it. Gary Wheeler had lived in Ashbury for over a decade, but no one knew much about him. He was a truck driver who spent long stretches away from the town, hauling freight across the country. His van was his lifeline, his way of escaping, or perhaps his way of hiding from something. Vasquez and her team went to Wheeler's home to question him. When they knocked, he answered immediately, appearing calm, almost too calm. He didn't seem shocked or scared, and his response to Emma's disappearance was strange. "I don't know anything about it," he said. "I was home all night, watched TV. You can ask anyone." His alibi seemed flimsy. He had been alone in his apartment, but no one could confirm his whereabouts. The thing that struck Vasquez the most was how easily he dismissed the situation. It was as if Emma's disappearance didn't affect him in the slightest. His van had been parked nearby. A simple coincidence. Or was this more than it appeared? The deeper Vasquez dug into Gary Wheeler's life, the more troubling things became. Wheeler hadn't been a perfect citizen. In fact, a few years ago he had been accused of stalking a woman, though the case had been dropped due to lack of evidence. The woman had filed a restraining order, but she had never pressed charges. Still, the rumors lingered, and people in town spoke of his unsettling behavior. One woman recalled seeing him loitering near the school playground late at night, staring at the children. It seemed harmless at first, but now, with Emma's disappearance, those memories were resurfacing. People had noticed Wheeler before. They'd seen him watching young girls at the park, lingering on the edges of groups, never quite fitting in. Was this just coincidence, or had the investigation uncovered a pattern of strange, predatory behavior? Detective Vasquez felt the pieces falling into place, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Wheeler wasn't the only piece of the puzzle. As the days stretched on, the search for Emma became more desperate. The community rallied together, posting flyers, organizing search parties, and hoping for any sign of life, but every lead, every clue, came up empty. The police, however, weren't standing still. Vasquez had one more lead to pursue: Wheeler's van. With a warrant in hand, she had it searched thoroughly. In the back of the van, they found something chilling: Emma's backpack. It was partially hidden beneath some old blankets, and inside there were her personal items: her phone, a notebook, and a few trinkets she had kept from past travels. This was no random crime. Emma had been targeted. But why? And who was the man in the van? The search had gone cold. The police were no closer to finding Emma than they had been days earlier. But just when it seemed like they were running out of options, a new clue emerged. Detective Vasquez received an anonymous tip. An employee at a local gas station had seen a girl matching Emma's description, walking alongside a man who looked eerily similar to Gary Wheeler. The witness, a young cashier named Leah, had been too afraid to speak up earlier, but now she was ready to share everything she had seen. She remembered the pair clearly: Emma's hoodie, the way she kept her head down, the strange man by her side. The sighting confirmed what Vasquez had feared. Gary Wheeler was involved, but Emma wasn't simply a victim of circumstance. Something about this whole situation felt off. Emma wasn't the type to be easily manipulated. Could she have been playing along with her abductor? Could she have been waiting for the right moment to escape? Vasquez didn't know for sure, but she suspected that Emma's mind might have been her greatest weapon all along. Vasquez was starting to see this case in a new light. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Emma wasn't just a victim. She was smart, resourceful, and determined. It wasn't just the way she had been raised, it was who she was at her core. Emma had a love for chess, a passion that ran deep in her family. She played with her father every weekend, and she was good, really good. Was it possible that she had been playing a psychological game with her kidnapper, just like she would with her father? The more Vasquez thought about it, the more she began to connect the dots. Emma had posted cryptic messages on her social media before her disappearance. One, in particular, stood out: checkmate. Could Emma have been using her captor's own strategy against him? And if so, what was her endgame? The days dragged on, each one a test of strength for both Emma and her family. The small town of Ashbury, once peaceful and carefree, was now a place full of fear and uncertainty. But while the town waited anxiously, Emma's mind never stopped working. In the small, isolated cabin where she had been kept, Emma spent her days quietly observing Gary Wheeler. She knew he wasn't watching her every move. He was too comfortable, too confident that she had no way of escaping. But that was his mistake. Emma had been through enough in her short life to know when to stay calm, when to observe, and when to act. She knew that Wheeler was not a man of patience. He made mistakes. Small ones at first, things she noticed when he would leave a door unlocked or let his guard down. It wasn't much, but to Emma, it was everything. Over the course of the days that followed her abduction, Emma studied him. She noticed his routines. She saw how, every night, Wheeler would drink too much, let his guard slip, and fall into a heavy sleep. It wasn't the first time she had seen someone who underestimated the abilities of those they thought they had control over. Emma wasn't scared anymore. She was thinking ahead. She knew her window of opportunity wouldn't last forever. She couldn't afford to wait too long. Emma also knew that once she made her move, there would be no turning back. The night came, and Wheeler had settled in for what he thought would be another uneventful evening. He sat in his chair, sipping on his beer, the TV casting a pale light across the room. Emma had been quiet all day, playing the part of the frightened girl who had lost hope. She hadn't made a sound, hadn't drawn any attention to herself. But now, in the stillness of the cabin, Emma made her move. She quietly slipped from her sleeping bag and moved to the window. She had been eyeing the lock for days. It wasn't much, but it would be enough. With careful hands, she twisted the latch and the window creaked open. Her heart raced, but her mind was calm. She knew this was her one chance, and she wouldn't waste it. Emma crept toward the door, listening to the sound of Wheeler's breathing, steady, deep, and unbothered. She could hear the wind outside, the rustling of the trees in the distance. There was no time to hesitate. Emma bolted for the door, slipped into the night, and ran as fast as she could. The cold air hit her like a slap in the face, but she didn't stop. She ran toward the woods, toward safety, each footstep a beat of defiance against her captor. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stop. Not now. She kept running until her legs burned, until she could hear her own ragged breath filling her ears. She didn't look back. Emma Clark had escaped. When Gary Wheeler woke up that night, it was as though the air had shifted. The cabin was silent. Too silent. For a moment, he didn't understand what was happening, but then his eyes landed on the empty sleeping bag. His heart skipped a beat. Emma was gone. He shot up, his panic overtaking his senses. How could this have happened? Where had she gone? What had she done? His mind raced, but it didn't take long to figure out what had happened. She'd escaped. Wheeler ran to the door, but by the time he opened it, Emma was already gone. He cursed loudly and slammed the door behind him. There was no time to waste. He had to find her. He couldn't let her get away. He jumped into his van and sped off into the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness, but Emma was already long gone. The police were immediately notified, and within hours the search was on. Flashlights danced across the woods, and helicopters flew overhead. The manhunt had begun, but Emma Clark had a head start, and she wasn't about to let that slip away. Emma had made it further than anyone expected. She found her way to a small gas station just outside Ashbury, her body exhausted but her resolve stronger than ever. She staggered up to the counter, gasping for breath, and the young cashier, Leah, instantly recognized her. "You're Emma Clark, aren't you?" Leah asked, her voice shaking. Emma nodded. She didn't have time for explanations, but Leah insisted on calling the police. The call was placed, and within minutes officers arrived at the gas station. The small town of Ashbury was on edge. With Emma's escape came a sliver of hope, but Gary Wheeler's rampage through the woods and his escalating violence made every resident fear the worst. They had known Emma as the bright, intelligent girl from the local high school, the girl who loved animals and aspired to become a marine biologist. Now, she was a symbol of survival, but no one was entirely sure how much she had suffered, how much of her innocence had been lost. When the police brought Emma to the gas station, the officers who had known her growing up were shocked. She looked the same, but there was a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was alive, but there was something different about her. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the turmoil that had surely unfolded in her mind. Detective Maria Vasquez stood by Emma as she made the phone call to her parents. It wasn't the reunion everyone had hoped for. There were no tears, no wild embraces. Instead, Emma spoke to her mother, her voice steady, almost too steady. "Mom, I'm okay," Emma said. "I'm safe now." It wasn't until after the call ended that Vasquez spoke. "You're very brave, Emma. Not many people would have handled this the way you did," she said. Emma looked at her, eyes sharp. "You know, I learned a lot about strategy during my time with him. He thought he was in control, but he was making mistakes every day. I just had to watch carefully." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't just waiting for a chance to escape. I was playing him, every single day. I was trying to predict his moves. And when the time came, I took it." Emma's response sent chills down Vasquez's spine. This was no ordinary teenager. This was a survivor who had outwitted her captor with a precision that most adult criminals could never manage. But Emma had a clear head, and Wheeler had never seen someone like her. Now, it seemed the world had underestimated her. The strength she had found within herself was something no one could have predicted. It was clear that Emma had used the same sharp mind she applied to chess games to read her captor's behavior and plan a precise, well-executed escape. Gary Wheeler hadn't just kidnapped her, he had picked a fight with someone who was far more resourceful than he ever imagined. Vasquez wasn't just impressed. She was now convinced that Emma was the key to solving everything. The investigation shifted gears once Emma was safely back in the fold. Detective Vasquez began to realize something. Emma wasn't just the victim anymore. She was a player in this twisted game. Wheeler had underestimated her, thinking she was just another scared girl, easy to control. But now the question was no longer about whether Emma would survive. It was about how she would confront her abductor when the time came. Wheeler, however, wasn't ready to give up. As authorities closed in on him, he grew more erratic. It wasn't just his rage that grew. It was his fear. He had made one mistake after another, and now he knew it was only a matter of time before the net closed around him. The investigation took another turn when Vasquez discovered something unsettling. Gary Wheeler had been keeping a journal, a detailed account of every action, every thought. It was clear that he had been obsessively documenting his time with Emma, and his twisted thoughts about her were written in a dark, disturbing tone. It became clear that he had been grooming her, though she had outsmarted him at every turn. But Wheeler's journal contained something even more chilling. There were references to other women, other girls he had kept captive in the past. His fixation with Emma wasn't just about control. It was part of a larger, disturbing pattern of behavior. The police began to connect the dots. this wasn't his first crime. With this new information in hand, Detective Vasquez had a new mission: to dig deeper into Wheeler's past. She reached out to the local authorities in neighboring towns, looking into cold cases of missing girls. The investigation took on a more sinister tone as more names surfaced, but just as it seemed they were about to piece it all together, the unthinkable happened. Gary Wheeler had escaped. The night Wheeler escaped was chaotic. He had been transferred to a temporary holding facility, awaiting formal charges. But during his transfer, the unthinkable occurred. He overpowered the guards, broke free, and vanished into the night. Ashbury, once a place of quiet safety, now found itself in the midst of an all-out manhunt. News outlets picked up the story, with reporters swarming the town and surrounding areas. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Would Wheeler strike again? Emma, still reeling from her abduction, found herself facing something more terrifying than the man who had kidnapped her: the possibility that he was still out there, hiding, waiting for the right moment to make his move. The community was thrown into chaos. Parents kept their children close, and people locked their doors as soon as the sun set. Emma's parents, Jonathan and Allison, were especially anxious. Though Emma was physically safe, they knew that her mind had been through something no parent ever wants to imagine. But Emma's response to Wheeler's escape wasn't fear. It was resolve. She was determined to help. Emma insisted that she could remember details about the cabin where she had been held. She could remember the layout, the sounds, the smells, everything she had observed. She became a key part of the investigation, using her sharp memory and keen eye to help the authorities track down Wheeler. Wheeler's disappearance only added to the urgency of the investigation. As days passed without any trace of him, the pressure mounted on the police and the community. Emma's parents were torn between supporting their daughter and the overwhelming desire to keep her away from the investigation. But Emma insisted that she could help. She had outsmarted Wheeler once, and she believed she could do it again. Meanwhile, the townspeople of Ashbury struggled to cope with the aftermath of the kidnapping. The sense of normalcy they once had was gone. People spoke in hushed tones when they saw Emma walking down the street. Her disappearance had shaken them. But now, as the hunt for Wheeler continued, the shadow of fear loomed larger than ever. The police intensified their search for Wheeler, using everything from drones to search dogs to track him down. But he was always one step ahead. He had vanished without a trace, and for a brief moment it seemed like he might never be caught. As Emma participated in the search, a part of her felt guilty. She felt as though she was the reason for the chaos. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wasn't responsible for Wheeler's actions. He had made his own choices. He was the one who had decided to harm her, and it was he who was hiding in fear of the consequences. Her determination to help the investigation was not just an act of bravery, it was her way of reclaiming control. She had already survived his twisted game once. Now she would see it through to the end. The breakthrough came when an old lead resurfaced. Emma, recalling a detail she hadn't initially remembered, pointed the investigators toward a nearby forest. Wheeler had spent a lot of time in that area. Emma described it vividly: the sound of the river, the abandoned cabin she had been kept in, the clearing where she had slipped away from him. The police began scouring the area, and they found the abandoned cabin just as Emma had described. It was tucked away in the woods, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look, and inside they found the clues they had been hoping for, a trail of evidence that led them straight to Wheeler. As they approached, they found him holed up in a makeshift shelter, hiding from the law. He had run out of options. It wasn't long before Wheeler was apprehended and taken into custody. The search that had terrorized Ashbury for so long was finally over. Emma watched the entire scene unfold from a distance. There was no fear in her eyes anymore, just relief. Her nightmare was finally over, and Ashbury could begin to heal. Gary Wheeler's capture marked the end of a terrifying chapter, but for Emma, it was the beginning of reclaiming her life. She had not only survived, but had helped bring her abductor to justice. Her story was one of triumph over fear, and it would be remembered as a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Thank you for joining us in uncovering the chilling story of Emma Clark. If her resilience and courage inspired you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and always look deeper. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing content.